I thought we should take a look back, since Newt Gingrich now is a presumptive top-tier candidate for the Republican nomination at some of his most outlandish positions, because I think, Lewis, that something about that smile of Newt Gingrich's always makes me laugh. People are kind of assuming Newt Gingrich is the steady, calm option, rational option among the Republicans. And while I agree he'd be a great debater against Obama, or at least better than Romney, I think, he's not a kind of vanilla, very standard proposal type guy. He has a number of skeletons in his closet that hopefully people will see as skeletons. I don't know. Are we going to list some of those? Did you want me to, or should I just allude to them?
No. I think we should be very specific.
Well, in 1981, to give you a specific example, Lewis, Gingrich co-sponsored a measure in the House to provide for therapeutic uses of marijuana in situations where it's life-threatening or sense-threatening illness. And a year later, he actually went and wrote a letter to the Journal of the American Medical Association reiterating that he has this view. We believe licensed physicians are competent to employ marijuana, right? And then in 1995, 14 years later, he proposes the death penalty for those involved in the drug trade. The death penalty, drawing a parallel to the kind of draconian policies of Singapore and Malaysia. We want to stop all drug traffic, said Gingrich in 1995. If you bring in a commercial quantity of illegal drugs, we will execute you. What do you make of this, Lewis? This is not being mentioned very much yet. Hopefully, this is one of many issues that will be brought up, because Gingrich appearing to be the consistent guy, whereas Romney is a flip-flopper, Gingrich has had some pretty severe flip-flops. Yes to medical marijuana, to execute people involved in the drug trade.
Well, okay, you're not going to like this, but I wouldn't call that a flip-flop. Right?
Let me guess, Lewis. Medical marijuana is completely separate than illegal trafficking of hard drugs.
Well, when you're talking about the illegal trafficking of hard drugs, you're not just talking about the drugs themselves and the people who are going to use them. It's huge.
Right.
What is encompassed in that, all the crime involved, all the things that happen. So
right.
I can see where he's coming from on these two ends, but to say that you're going to execute everyone who brings in a commercial quantity of illegal drugs is obviously insane.
There's another thing you're forgetting, though. To say that you're for medicinal marijuana in 1981 and then to now be completely exempt from even having to answer any questions about that in the current campaign also doesn't make sense. Let's start asking Newt the questions.
Right.
Now
well, hopefully if he becomes the nominee, we'll start hearing those questions.
Hopefully we will. In 2005, Gingrich called for universal but confidential DNA testing as part of healthcare reform, where you would have to have DNA tests to qualify for certain types of care, as reported by a South Carolina newspaper. And then in 2005, he suggested, after the Ward Churchill affair, that tenure should be abolished completely at state universities. Just get rid of it altogether. 2006, he suggested the U.S. should pursue counterterrorism strategy that would curtail terrorists' free speech rights, predicting a serious debate about the First Amendment. Yeah, he's right. It would have created quite a debate.
I'll say.
And in 2009, in the speech to AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, he declared that an electromagnetic pulse, an EMP, attack would be the greatest threat to U.S. national security. And he cites that he got this idea from a fictional thriller to bolster the case. He said his friend Bill Forstchen writes about this in a fictional novel, a thriller. And he says that is clearly the most serious terrorist national security threat that we need to look at.
Right, because when someone from Al-Qaeda wants to deal massive damage to the U.S., they're going to use an EMP and knock out our phones and computers for 24 hours, right?
And in 2010, Gingrich argued that the U.S. should not allow the construction of the infamous Ground Zero Mosque, as I call it, the Lower Manhattan Interfaith and Muslim Community Center. There should be no mosque near Ground Zero in New York so long as there are no churches or synagogues in Saudi Arabia. The time for double standards that allow Islamists to behave aggressively towards us while they demand our weakness and submission is over. Right, because it makes sense to do the same thing Saudi Arabia does. It makes sense to play eye for an eye because we're just like Saudi Arabia knew. Does that really make sense?
Yeah, and we can go back into the First Amendment here too.
And then most recently, in an appearance at Harvard, he challenged child labor laws, saying, it might be really good to replace the master janitor at schools with little kids, so they could be janitors and start earning some money. That was also another one of his ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So Newt Gingrich certainly, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, really. Certainly his fair share of stuff that we should be looking at.